what has been happening with the campaigns, what the Southeast stands to gain from an Atiku presidency, and the strength of all the political parties in some of the regions in the country. Will be joined now by the convener of Southeast Patriots, Obunike Ohaibu, who will also be telling us why he did not join Keyamo's suit against Atiku as he earlier announced. Thank you so much and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So we'll start with that question. Why did you not join, or are you no longer willing, like you announced earlier, to join Keyamo's suit against Atiku?
The answer is in my reason for actually submitting petitions to 5 agencies, because at the middle of the campaign, the spokesman of the APC presidential campaign suddenly realized that he's an activist and that Atiku must be disqualified, and he decided to write petitions to 3 agencies. And I said no. The Supreme Court has been consistent that it's only the courts that can disqualify candidates from running elections. No, even any administrative indictment, whether police or anybody, is not enough to disqualify a candidate. Probably that was a plan by APC to disqualify my presidential candidate. And I decided to join because the allegations he had against Atiku, we still had much more was allegations against his candidate and the other candidates. And I felt, okay, if this is a way to disqualify our candidate, that let the security agencies investigate all the allegations. And at the end of the day, what happened? He went to the court and the match was fixed, and the only reason for the entire I wouldn't say noise, was to distract or disqualify the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party. And the court fixed date for March. So what is the point going there? Let the security agencies investigate the matter and do the needful. He can go to court after the 25th of February. Felt he was probably either trying to distract us or maybe entertaining himself.
So you withdrew, really?
Pardon?
You are no longer joining, that's the point.
Of course, my only reason for joining is to ensure that if they want to disqualify the candidate, that the 3 major candidates will be disqualified. And the court has fixed a date for March. Election is on 25th February. So what is the point joining? The case is coming up after the elections, and I'm sure the matter was just because of the elections. And if the election will come before the case, I believe it's pointless wasting my time. The security agencies are doing their job.
Yeah, because you've raised very, very huge allegations here. Perhaps I probably read them out. For the following offences, you talked about offence against Code of Conduct Bureau, money laundering, criminal breach of trust, criminal misappropriation, conspiracy on drugs and narcotics, and all of this spreads across all the candidates who are mentioned in this suit. However, you just said elections are in about 48 hours, and after the election, perhaps would this actually mean, in any guise or in any form, important to carry through? What are the dangers of this? I mean, this is just one of the elections. We still have governorship elections coming up in March.
The dangers is that a spokesman of a campaign, a candidate, an opponent, cannot suddenly realize that he's a Nigerian, that he wants the system to work, and on discovery, because he has been in the field, probably found out that the candidate he was trying to market, the Nigerians were not buying it. So he wanted to use the back door to disqualify a credible candidate. And I could not have sat down and watched him do that. And I said, okay, no problems. There are so many allegations against your candidate as well. Probably all of them will be disqualified.
All right.
So and that does not, that I did not join him in court, does not stop. I've already submitted the petitions. In fact, ICPC has even acknowledged my petition. That doesn't stop them from doing their work. If those allegations are correct, what I believe and I expect is that the relevant government agencies, because we need to start building strong institutions. We can't cajole a government agency to start to disqualify a candidate because you're a minister and you are speaking for their opponent. So I have confidence in the security agencies, the EFCC, and DLEA, Code of Conduct. I expect them to do their jobs, and I wouldn't want to bother about that. But I would have been concerned if they have tried to disqualify my candidate, because the Supreme Court has been consistent that they do not have such powers.
You know, because we do know that such cases actually after election might also create another kind of problem for whoever emerges the winner of the election. That's another point that we would want you to look at the end of the day. But let's first of all look at the general appraisal of what is happening in the polity today. The elections are just 3 days away. How would you appraise the campaign so far?
So far, I believe to a larger extent we've not had, with the exception of what the drama coming from Rivers, I believe the candidates have done well. They've campaigned around they've been to almost all the states, and nothing so serious has been recorded. Nigerians have listened to the candidates, and I'm sure in less than 48 hours, as you said, the decision we've made, and I'm sure all of us will celebrate.
Would you say the campaign was really hugely issue-based? Because we saw a lot of distractions, really, with the issue of the Naira redesign policy and some of these issues, taking candidates away from what Nigerians really are going to. It would seem like it was towards this end of campaign, it was just Naira issue that is Nigeria's problem.
You know, when the APC failed to, you know, with that drama of you know, whistleblower and blower of whistle to distract our candidate. That didn't happen. The next time they put up a policy and they are antagonizing the policy and all that, I wouldn't, that was not part of the campaign. I mean, the CBN is doing her job. I believe they should continue to do their jobs and the campaign should continue. I don't see any reason. In fact, as a matter of fact, I'm not supposed to express an opinion, but I will be shocked after today's hearing in the Supreme Court if any pronouncement will be made today, because either way it will be considered to have been made for political convenience. The Supreme Court is meant to guide on policies. I expect that they may probably adjourn the case to next week or next month to you know, tell us what the right steps the CBN in future should take, whether the one they did now is correct, and what they should be looking at in future if they want to design Naira. That's what the Supreme Court is meant to do. Anybody trying to use the Supreme Court to, you know, push in some billions for the election, I'm sure they'll be disappointed. My personal opinion, though.
All right, so let's look at the issue of, you know, what the Southeast stands to benefit. There's been a lot of apprehension and perhaps a little modicum of courage of whether there will be elections in the Southeast with the heightened insecurity. I mean, just 2 days ago we saw the burning of houses and, you know, the burning of a woman in Imo State in certain communities, and that has raised fears, arguments of voter apathy, and amongst others. So in your take, first of all, how do you evaluate that scenario affecting the elections in the Southeast, and then how do you also presuppose that the election outcome, if His Excellency Atiku Abubakar wins, would help the Southeast to reorganize its security architecture?
Okay, I think what is happening in the Southeast is an unfortunate development. Unfortunately, politicians have, I'm sorry to say that, you know, they've decided to run with the narrative that we are marginalized, we have been enslaved in Nigeria and all that, and this election will determine our liberation. And also with that mindset, some people are saying, no, we don't need that liberation that could be taken away, let's have our own and all that. And it's totally wrong, because the Southeast in the early 70s after the Biafran War, they moved to all the parts of the country. And today, I mean, how can you say, personally, I don't think anybody's presidential ambition will validate my citizenship of Nigeria. I'm a Nigerian, and I consider myself a privileged Nigerian. And if you look at some of my brothers, they are privileged Nigerians, because if you look at their mates from other parts of the country, you cannot say that they are slaves. They are not. So it's that narrative that people are trying to harvest on. It's not just with this election, Adora. If you could remember, when census was conducted, somebody came up and said, oh, they should not count us. At the end of the day, Nigeria conducted census. People were counted. People who stayed away were not counted. And Nigeria is working with the figure. The census is what they are using. So, it's not just, people built okay, let me give you an example. We started voting for this since 1999. A lot of people have been voting. I know a lot of friends who are in Alaba who have been voting since 1999. Then in 2021, you shut down the market because they have to go and register. Somebody who is already registered. Some people came to market from Aba, some came from Ghana, some came from Cameroon. They were not aware of that, and you shut them out. It's just because people have been made to believe that they have been enslaved and they need to liberate themselves. And I'm telling you, I'm not a slave in Nigeria. I know the problem I have in Anambra is the same problem they have in Bauchi, is the same problem they have in Ogun State. There is nothing in the southwest that they benefit because Obasanjo had been a president that we are not benefiting in the southeast. Jonathan was president. There is nothing in the south that you said is their benefit because Jonathan was president. What we need in Nigeria is to look at this and get it corrected. The constitution. We need to restructure Nigeria. And the only person who is offering this for Ndibo as we speak today is Atiku Abubakar, the presidential candidate of the PDP.
All right, but first, you know, like they would always say that charity begins at home. You talked about leadership, you talked about political incursions in some of this crisis. How do you think, because this is 48 hours to election and certain areas are still, you know, on the hotbed, what will be the call to the Southeasterners? Because the first things first is to be alive for an election to determine who the outcome is. How are you going to speak to the leadership of those zones?
I will encourage all leaders from the southeast to speak out, because if you don't speak out now, we'll have more problems after the elections. Because if people honestly believe that they have been enslaved and they need this election to liberate themselves, and after the election, if their expectations are not met, we'll find ourselves in a worse situation in the southeast. Political parties are running elections, not tribes. Individuals are running elections, not tribes. What is their agenda? What is their program? What do we? I don't know. The first question is, as an Igbo man, what do we need? The records from NIMASA has shown that almost 60% of the containers we have from Lagos, they end up in Onitsha and Aba zone. Is that our roads are not meant to do that? The person who is in the Nigerian Ports Authority, because you have Ports Authority in the exclusive list, he doesn't care about that. Lagos is convenient for them. They have their offices in Lagos. They don't want to know about other ports. Why can't we work on ensuring that people are involved? Port is so lucrative that you can even borrow to dredge River Niger to ensure that small vessels come to River Niger, down to Lokoja here, down to Makurdi. Lagos will be decongested. That is what our very deep trader needs. We need to open up our system. Could you believe that even in this constitution, railway is in the exclusive list? So if Lagos and Ogun State decide to build a railway, they need permission from the federal government. Why? We need to restructure this country to the benefit of everybody. As we speak today, one of the challenges we are having in Zamfara is because people are trying to mine gold. And the people who have the gold believe that it's a federal government property, so they don't care what is happening to it. Why don't we find a way to get all the states to take whatever they have in their lands, pay a certain percentage to the federal government? People will own some of these things that are creating problems for us.
All right, so you said earlier that your citizenship of Nigeria is not in question, but there are people who believe that they have been marginalized so much so that they don't even believe in the country anymore, and that is why you're having some of the agitations down southeast. And then you also have this insecurity, which Adora mentioned earlier, which had led to the weekly sit at home that you have in that part of the country, and nobody up until now has been able to deal with that issue, and it had continued until this election. So the worry for many people is, would they be safe to come out for election if these things are not addressed? And I'm asking you, how are you going to, or how is your candidate going to look at this issue to ensure that it doesn't mar, his expectations from that region?
Well, I think the responsibility of my candidate is to sell his program to the people of the Southeast. Maintaining security in that area is the responsibility of the APC-led federal government. If that has failed, that means they have failed. But what I'm saying is that there is need for people from the Southeast to understand that the narrative people are running is not true. It's most unfortunate. The most successful group of people in a particular entity are telling you that they are marginalized, that they are slaves. How? The people who run the business, people who run the economy, go to Abuja. Without sounding any more than 60% of the most beautiful houses you will see in Abuja are probably owned by people from the Southeast. Go to all the beautiful estates. The greater percentage of the residents in those estates are people from the Southeast. And you are giving them the impression that they are slaves and they need somebody's presidency to validate their citizenship. And in my view, it's wrong. It's when people run these narratives, don't forget that there are always criminal elements that will take advantage of any situation they have found themselves. And they use this narrative to justify that. Going forward, my presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, has promised to restructure Nigeria. Every country, let me give you an example. Why restructuring is important. We have police in the exclusive list. The implication is that the Anambra State government cannot have state police. In my community, since the NSAS, all the 4 divisions in my community, in my local government, were destroyed. The police station in my community has not functioned since NSAS. They need the approval from the man in Edeth's house to give us personnel. More personnel than the division is entitled to. More arms than the division is entitled to. That will not be the priority of the man in Edeta because he has probably never been to Nail South and may never been to Nail South in his life. So he doesn't really understand what is happening there. But if you remove that from the exclusive list and you have state police, the fact remains that the man in Oka knows the challenge we have. If he doesn't correct it, next time when he comes for the election, he cannot campaign in our community because we will vote against him.
All right.
So these are issues we should be talking about.
There's a poll. Yesterday we've had several polls which tipped other candidates are, winning the election. But this particular one from Polav tipped your candidate, as candidate who is likely to win the election, presidential election on the 25th. But there's also an angle, an aspect of that poll which said that this election will be largely, based on ethnicity and religion, so to speak. Where you see the northerners saying, okay, they want to go for their own. You have the southerners say they want to go for their own, especially when some of the southerners believe it was supposed to be a southern president at this time to take over power. Don't you think that since there are southerners who are also vying for this position, that it could affect the chances of your candidate as you're talking about?
Okay, let me tell you, my candidate is not, you may not know that since the Civil War, nobody from the Northeast, where my candidate comes from, has ever been the president. Nobody, just like my zone, Southeast. But the noise is more in my area. You've not had anybody from the Northeast saying that they have never been president, is their turn. No. The son is marketing himself. So you find out that people who are not, at the end of the day, despite the noise, you find out that people who will not vote on that basis are more. This is not the first time we're having this kind of scenario. At some point, Action Group led by Awolowo took Southwest. Zik was in charge of the Southeast and all that. It did not determine the president. The person who will be the president is the person who will have support across all the zones. And if you have information on that, you prove me wrong. I don't think there is any state in the federation where PDP will not get 25%. But some of these champions in their areas and tribes may not do that beyond their areas of influence. That is why the Constitution is deliberate on what you need to do before you could be elected the President and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Nigeria. The number of states you will win, the number of states you will get 25% in addition to having the majority votes cast. If you look at that holistically, you will find out that Atiku Abubakar will win the election because he has support across the entire federation. He has built support and he is speaking to the issues. I have brothers who are traders, and I heard Atiku Abubakar the other day telling people of Rivers, the deep sea port in Rivers, I am going to work on it to make sure that it's functional. The train connecting Rivers to the northeast is going to be functional. He is telling people that if you are in Lagos because you have to go, and if you are staying in Lagos because you have to clear your goods and all that because of ports, no, that the ports in the old eastern region will start being functioning and goods will be transported from Rivers to northeast. Who are the people that are going to benefit from that? The same people who are saying that they are slaves.
Others would also want to look at the political optics. I mean, you mentioned Rivers, which of course you understand the dynamics between the River State governor and the PDP in itself. Of course, the newspapers did run with the fact that some local governments like Degaman, some other local governments in River State were being told, in fact, mandatorily, to support the APC candidate. On the other hand, His Excellency Atiku Abubakar says, well, I will not play the witch hunting politics. I do not play with vendetta. But if the party in itself, even though they have, said this G5 governors, it's of no consequence to us. We carry on with our campaigns. The issues are there, but we will still emerge. And you have an Otom who is loudly and clearly saying, I am supporting Obi, even if I have to relinquish my senatorial ticket. And you have these blocks of strong states, whether you like it or not, having divided interest in different candidates that are not your candidate. Isn't that going to be detrimental?
First of all, I will say that I'm a bit disappointed with the IU-led National Working Committee of the PDP. I do not understand why Governor Wike still parades himself as a member of the PDP. And there is information I have, a privileged information I have, that our people need to watch carefully. I was a privileged member of TICOM, led by High Chief Raymond Dopesi, who moved around the states. The day we went to Abia, where he made the pronouncement that Atiku Abubakar will hand over will be succeeded by somebody from the southeast. The man from Rivers went bananas. He was calling everybody. That day we couldn't sleep. In fact, as a matter of fact, our leader almost resigned from that movement. Why? Because Atiku will hand over to somebody from the southeast, and our people are not watching. The entire thing is, okay, if he has won the ticket, who is he going to hand over to? But our people will not understand that. In 2017, I was a privileged member, and I worked with PDP in Anambra State to deliver PDP in Anambra State gubernatorial election. Wike came. He was the one that conducted the delegates election. The day he came, the ovation was loud and all that. But some of the aspirants, as is normal in politics, wanted to create problems. And Governor Wike wanted to address in the Anambra, and I went to him and said, please, you are very popular here. Why don't you speak Igbo? He said, I don't speak that language. I'm saying this on the national TV. But today he's singing Ejendeba, Ejendeba. Somebody is trying to deceive somebody.
All right, we just have to leave this discussion at this point. We must thank you very much for your thoughts and your time on the show. We've been counting down on the election, which is just in 3 days' time, and doing general appraisal of what has been happening, the campaign so far, and the chances of the candidates, particularly in the Southeast region. And we've been joined by the convener of Southeast Patriots, Obunike Ohaibu, to also talk about why he has decided not to join the suits, which he intended to join with Kiamo before against his candidate. And that's how we draw up the curtain on the show. Well, thank you again.
Thank you for
on
coming.
the segments, really.
Yeah.
So we'll take a quick break now.